If there is one thing that I have noticed in myself that has changed drastically throughout the years, I've been doing semen retention from before I got on it, and as I have continued on, it is this. It is that now I have an unsatiable appetite for confrontation. And what I mean by that is it is no longer something that you try to avoid. It is something that you stare directly in the face and confront. Because that is exactly how someone could go a decent amount of time on this sexual energy preservation journey. Because in order for you to get through that, you have to face your shadows, and you have to confront everything about yourself that may or may not be, good or bad, but like everyone has their insecurities, everyone has their subconscious thought patterns that are keeping them in a certain state of being. However, I'm saying is this is one thing that I think for me personally, it is second to none now. It is just night and day. I reckon years ago, if someone, passed by me and gave me a snide comment, I reckon back then I just would have let it slide because I didn't want any trouble. Like, that was my mentality. And if I reflect on my childhood and schooling and whatnot, I can see now that I didn't have people's respect back then. It was very obvious. And I know that I was going through a lot, but still, people may have sympathy or empathy for you, but it doesn't mean that they have respect for you. That's just life. And that is one thing about being a man that you actually have to deal with on your own, pretty much, because there is no alternative bailout option for you as a man in that regard. It is just like, if you aren't strong enough to overcome whatever you are going through, that's on you. If you expect someone else to come around and pat you on the back and kind of validate your feelings of being a victim, then it just won't happen, because that other person, they themselves think that they are a victim, and their own ego, is pretty much going to guarantee that they feel as though they are a bigger victim than anyone else, because the ego wants to be validated, and also the ego can only validate what it has has experienced. It can't really validate what you've experienced. It can kind of think about it and be like, oh yeah, that would be pretty shit. But like, it can't actually sit there and be like, oh yeah, that is pretty bad. You know, like that is a lot worse than. It's only someone who has a realistic outlook and can actually see things clearly, that can kind of understand where you are coming from. However, back to the point, that was a bit of a sidetrack. I do not shy away from confrontation anymore. It isn't just now, it is ever since I started SR. Ever since I started to get that masculine higher aura in me going, you know. I'll give you a couple of examples in recent times. I started a new job recently, and obviously when you are new to a workplace, you know, like you're kind of like the outsider that needs to be assimilated into the culture and environment. And I know with me, like I'm in an industry where like you come across a lot of people that are really rough around the edges. Like it's kind of like a blue collar stereotype. And these guys, you know, like they can be very cutthroat with how they treat you and how they view you. And it can be easy for them to take one look at you and think, he looks like a wuss, you know, like he looks like some privileged guy that hasn't worked a hard day in his life, you know, like that type of thing. Anyway, like had an interaction the other day. I was with someone else. I was talking, and I was trying to, you know, like get the job done. And I noticed that, like, over the other side of the room, I noticed that some guy was talking to another guy as he was looking at me, right? And he was asking the other guy, oh, so what's his name? What's his name? As he was staring, you know, like at me. And I kind of like just shrugged it off. However, he kept on saying it. It was like, oh, you know, like, what's his name again? What's his name? Until I basically like just got up, I looked at him and I was like, Jacob. And then just like stared at him, you know, like, and then I was like, oh yeah, thanks man. You know, like, and after that, yeah, everything was fine. And ever since that moment, he's been really nice to me. Yeah, it was really, it was interesting. And then another altercation, right, I had was 2 days ago now. So I was loading my truck, and I was having trouble fitting everything in the truck because I had a smaller truck than usual. And I was having trouble trying to fit every single box in it. And as I was doing it, I had a box that was sticking uh, out of the truck, and it meant that I wouldn't be able to close the doors on the truck, like pretty much. And I was a bit like oblivious to it because I was thinking about other things, but I eventually would have found out. Um, and then a guy, like, he's like a senior person at the place. He isn't the highest boss at that place. He's like the third boss, if that makes sense. He's like, he he is in the hierarchy. However, me being a new person, like, I don't really know the hierarchy. I'm just minding my own business. And he walks past me, and he basically said, "It won't fit," like, and he said it in in a way that was like, it was telling me to move it, and it was in a very aggressive and dismissing tone, like, like, I don't have to talk nicely to you, like, you're just this, I'm here, you're there, like that type of thing. It was that type of vibe. And I can tell you, I am super sensitive to that type of stuff. It may not have seemed like a big deal to other people, but to me, I noticed that stuff really, really quickly. Like, and just without thinking, right? Like, it was a knee jerk reaction in me. I think that it was contributed by the fact that at the time I was doing heavy lifting and stuff. So obviously with heavy lifting, like, your testosterone's probably up a little bit. And I heard what he said, right? Um, yeah, and I agreed, like, it was sticking out. I was going to uh, I was going to fix it, but what I had an issue with was how he spoke to me. And as soon as he said what he said, I turned around and I was like, "Hey mate, do you mind talking to me a bit nicer?" Like, just super calm, super calm. And then he was like, "Oh, I told you what to do," you know. And then I basically, like, just reiterated, "Yes, I understand that, but talk nicer to me, please." Like, and like, I was dead, staring at him, right? And I was very calm too. Like, another thing is that, like, you don't feel the need to shout or raise your voice, because that is obviously a sign of weakness. Yeah, it never occurs to you to do that. Like, it always comes across as a calm, composed, but stern and firm statement, right? Like, and this guy, he didn't know what to say to me, right? However, he stared at me for like 5 seconds, and me and him were just in like a staring contest for like oh no, sorry, I said 5 minutes. I meant 5 seconds. 5 seconds. 5 minutes. It was 5 seconds, right? And like, I was just freaking just straight, like, and this guy was probably thinking he has he has an authority over me, and I'm here basically checking him and saying, like, "No, please don't do that to me." And he didn't know. how to react. He just stared at me like kind of in disbelief, right? And then he looked away. He was the first one to look away, by the way. I mean, and that's another thing that I'm just completely surprised with, because like my past self would, like would always look away. And he just walked off. And at the time, like I didn't even think about what had happened there. I was just like, okay, let's move on. Let's, like because I had a job to do. However, 5 minutes later, as I kind of like calmed down a bit, I was just like, holy shit. I was kind of like reflecting on like what I just did, and I was just like, man, I have changed so much. And yeah, I think that in and of itself is the one thing that I am most grateful for, is that when you have a high enough sense of self-respect, you are willing to put that self-respect in before your very own safety. And I think that is a very masculine trait that like guys have. I'll just mention though is that I have never been in an actual fight. And that may sound like crazy to some people, but it is something that has never, well, it has come close. I've come close in my earlier years. However, in that occasion, I always had the people skills to kind of diffuse the situation, if that makes sense. However, yeah, I've noticed something with me is that every time I get into a confrontation, and it seems to be, as you go along the journey, it seems to be more and more frequent, because like there's just something about your aura and energy that kind of it irritates the wrong people, if that makes sense. But every time I've been in a confrontation, it has always been me on the receiving end of something, and me basically setting a precedent and basically saying, oh no, like I'm not going to have that. It is never me freaking going around and being a dickhead to people. It never happens. It never happens. It is just every time that someone does something that I feel is any ounce of disrespect, I just jump on it straight away now. And honestly, like ever since I have been like that, I mean, like you may not have as many friends, but I can tell you like that people respect me a lot more now. And I mean, it is second to none. It really is. However, yeah, so I want to hear about your stories, right? Like I'm sure I am not the only one that has been through, like this type of stuff. In the comments, like feel free to comment like any situations or stories that you have gotten yourself into or experience when it comes to just basically having more balls and having more of an appetite for confrontation. No fear, just straight out straight out direct, stern, but also calm. And that is something I think that every guy on SR can, can really appreciate and look back on and be like, oh man, I'm glad I'm now like this, because I respect myself more, and others respect me more. I mean, like, others may not like me as much at first. However, over time, if you kind of prove yourself to be, like genuine, like a kind and genuine person who has good intentions and knows how to talk to people with respect. Like, any situation that I have had, it has always been someone who doesn't know or isn't willing to speak to me with respect. And it's basically me just calmly calling them out and suggesting or asking them to change their behavior. But it isn't in a weak way. It's in a very calm and composed way. So yeah, if you have any stories, feel free to comment below. Yeah, I'd love to hear them, because I know it isn't just me. Like, all of us go through this type of stuff. And one thing is for certain is that you will irritate people without even trying. Like, just your presence will trigger people. Like, and if you haven't already, you will come across like certain type of situations as I have described in this video. And until they actually happen, it is hard for you to know how you will actually react. And I'm pretty happy with myself that I have now developed that trait in me. And sometimes I feel like I'm being too sensitive, right? Like, however, I'll try to be a bit more discerning when it comes to that. But I think with that type of stuff, like, if it feels like disrespect in the moment, it probably is. And even if it isn't, it wouldn't hurt to kind of try to set that boundary, because it'll only benefit you in the future. All right, guys. All right, take care.